A ghost wants to play. It was an evening like any other at the cemetery. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows across the tombstones. I stood among the graves, a gravedigger accustomed to the eerie ambience that settled over the place as night drew near. My shovel, pickaxe, and lantern lay by my side, ready for another round of digging. As the last sliver of daylight vanished, I lit my lantern and began my work. The sound of dirt shifting and the occasional clang of my tools against the earth were the only noises that disturbed the growing stillness. But then, something odd happened. I reached for my pickaxe, only to find it wasn't there. Puzzled, I glanced around, thinking perhaps I had absent-mindedly moved it, yet there was no sign of it anywhere. I scratched my head, chalking it up to tiredness, and grabbed my shovel to continue the task. Minutes later, when I went to retrieve the shovel, it too had vanished. Panic began to prickle at the edges of my mind. I had placed it right next to me, hadn't I? Frantically, I scanned the area with my lantern, my heart pounding in my chest. And then, just as suddenly as they had disappeared, my tools reappeared. The pickaxe and shovel were right where I'd left them, as if mocking my confusion. The lantern flickered ominously, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the gravestones. A chill ran down my spine, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That's when I heard it, a faint, distant giggle, like that of a child. My heart skipped a beat. I had heard the tales, of course, about the child ghost that supposedly haunted this cemetery. But I had always dismissed them as mere stories meant to entertain. I swallowed hard, my eyes darting around as I tried to see something or anything. I steadied my nerves and decided to press on with my work, hoping that my imagination was playing tricks on me. As I continued to dig, the atmosphere grew increasingly heavy. The lantern's light seemed to dim, and the air grew colder. Once again, my tools vanished, only to reappear in the same bizarre fashion. My heart pounded in my chest as a whisper reached my ears, a child's voice, faint and barely audible, yet unmistakably real. Play with me. I froze, my skin crawling with a mix of fear and disbelief. Slowly, I turned, my lantern's light trembling in my shaking hand. And there, standing just beyond the range of the lantern's glow, was a childlike figure. A translucent form, dressed in old-fashioned clothing. Its eyes fixed on me, the child ghost simply smiled, a haunting expression that sent shivers down my spine. And then, with an ethereal giggle, it vanished into the night. I didn't waste a moment. I abandoned my tools, leaving the lantern flickering on the ground, and fled the cemetery as fast as my legs could carry me. The memory of that encounter has haunted me ever since. Shadows of the midnight. It was supposed to be the perfect getaway, a vacation house tucked away in the serene countryside, surrounded by lush greenery and endless tranquility. My 5 closest girlfriends and I were beyond excited to spend a few days away from our hectic lives, catching up and creating lasting memories. Little did we know, those memories would take a terrifying turn. First day was filled with laughter, silly games, and reminiscing about old times. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we all gathered around the fireplace, sharing stories and relishing the warmth it provided. Our excitement for the trip seemed to override any sense of unease that might have come from the fact that a cemetery lay just beyond the backyard. During the day, it looked peaceful, almost picturesque, with weathered gravestones standing sentinel under the dappled sunlight. But as night fell, the ambience shifted drastically. On the second night of our stay, something woke me from a deep slumber. Groggy and disoriented, I rubbed my eyes and stared out the window. Moonlight spilled into the room, casting an eerie glow that illuminated the scene before me. The cemetery, now shrouded in an inky darkness, was anything but tranquil. My heart raced as I nudged my sleeping friends awake, the urgent need to show them what I was witnessing, overpowering my own fear. One by one, they joined me by the window, their faces slowly morphing from confusion to a mixture of astonishment and dread. There, amidst the tombstones and gnarled trees, danced a collection of shadowy figures. They moved with a fluid grace, their movements almost otherworldly. As we watched, the shadows began to congregate around a central point, forming a circle. Their movements grew more unsettling. It was as if they were engaged in some kind of eerie ritual, one that sent shivers down our spines. Suddenly, one of the figures broke away from the circle and turned its head toward us. Even from the distance, I could feel its gaze, a penetrating and malevolent stare that seemed to pierce through the glass and into my very soul. Panic surged through me, and I stumbled back from the window, pulling my friends with me. We huddled together in the center of the room, hearts and minds racing faster. What had we just witnessed? Was it some kind of supernatural gathering? Were those shadows the restless spirits of the cemetery, awakened by our presence in the vacation house? The rest of that night was spent in fearful silence, each of us too afraid to look out the window again. First light of dawn couldn't come soon enough, and as the sun's rays finally warmed the room, the shadows in the cemetery seemed to retreat, blending into the daylight like a haunting nightmare. Our vacation had taken an unexpected turn, leaving us with a chilling tale that we could scarcely believe had happened. We packed our bags as quickly as we could, eager to leave the house and the cemetery behind. As we drove away, I glanced back at the vacation house, my heart heavy with the weight of the unsettling experience. A lady in the back seat. It was a chilly autumn evening as I drove my two kids, Sarah and Jake, home from a friend's birthday party. The sun had already set, and darkness was slowly engulfing the world around us. Laughter and excitement from the party still echoed in the car, but an eerie feeling started to creep in as we approached the old cemetery on our route. The atmosphere turned somber as we neared the entrance. I could feel a shiver run down my spine, and I instinctively tightened my grip on the steering wheel. As we passed by the cemetery, something caught my eye. A figure, pale and otherworldly, stood beneath the flickering streetlight just beyond the cemetery gates. My heart was pounding fast. It was a woman, dressed in a flowing white gown, her long hair billowing in the wind. But what chilled me to the bone was her vacant, hollow gaze fixed directly on our car. I forced my eyes back to the road, my pulse quickening. "Kids, look the other way and don't pay attention to anything outside," I urged, my voice betraying my own fear. Jake asked if there was something wrong, his voice tinged with worry. I replied and reassured that nothing was wrong. The road stretched ahead, seemingly endless, as anxiety settled heavily in the car. I could feel the weight of that white figure's gaze lingering on us, even though I dared not look back. The rational part of me insisted that it was a tired imagination, conjuring up terrors in the dark. But then, an eerie silence enveloped the car. The engine hummed, the tires rolled over the asphalt, but there were no more sounds of children's laughter or casual chatter. I dared a glance at my rearview mirror, my heart seizing in my chest. Sarah and Jake were staring straight ahead, their eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. Their faces were ashen, mirroring the fear that now gripped me. "Mom, who's that lady sitting between us?" Sarah's voice was barely audible. trembling with a mix of curiosity and terror. I felt a chill crawl up my spine as I forced myself to look in the back seat. My breath caught in my throat. There, sitting between my two children, was the same woman in white. Her eyes were empty voids, and her pale hand rested gently on each of their shoulders. Adrenaline surged through me, and I slammed on the brakes, the screeching tires drowning out the thudding of my heart. The figure vanished from the back seat, and the car fell into an eerie silence once again. I made a U-turn and sped away from the cemetery, my mind racing with thoughts of what we had just witnessed. As we left the cemetery behind, the atmosphere slowly lightened. Sarah and Jake's expressions returned to normal, and their laughter once again filled the car. But I couldn't shake off the feeling that the White Lady had left a lingering presence, a reminder that the boundary between the living and the unknown was thinner than we could ever imagine.